We'll have, perhaps we could take questions for both the speakers together at the end so that we have more time and that the students get the chance to make their full presentations. So our first speaker today is Jobin M. Kanjarikat, uh, who he has an academic background in English, linguistics, and philosophy. He currently teaches at the Department of English at Vellore Institute of Technology, Vellore, Tamil Nadu. Helma Ramthyangem is pursuing her PhD from the Department of English in Delhi University. She was admitted to the to the program under the supervision of Hani Babu to work with the problems and issues and language and ethnic identity among the Khmers. And as mutually decided, the mm, um, I think Jobin and Thelma will both speak for 15 minutes, and then hopefully we will be able to have another 20, 15 to 20 minutes. We can shoot over a little bit to have a discussion. So, Jobin, over to you.
Hello, thank you, Aisha. And I also want to say that I was a student of Hani's a very long time ago. So, I really don't feel that I'm a student anymore because I've been doing many other things in
Okay,
up to that.
my
So, but
apologies.
still, but that's fine, no problem. I'm fine. I'm happy with that, because my association with Hani Bab was so instructive in the sense I've learned a lot from him, from his attitude, and from him as a scholar, and from his commitment to truth. So it's always a pleasure to be referred to as that. Okay, so I will just start with my subject, right? So humanizing language sciences and the quest for justice. That's my title. And I just want to talk about some problems with the discipline, the scientific inquiry into language. Okay, so this doesn't mean that I have great disrespect for academics who are, practicing that. I have great respect for them. Some of them are very open-minded, eclectic in their approaches and so on. But there are some problems which I thought are important, and I think I have a sense that Hani himself also had occasion to respond to these issues. Okay, so now let me start. So I start with a quote from Chomsky, 1965. So that's linguistic theory is concerned primarily with an ideal speaker listener in a completely homogeneous speech community who knows its language perfectly and is unaffected by such dramatically irrelevant conditions as memory limitations, distractions, shifts of attention and interest, and errors, random or characteristic, in applying his knowledge of the language in actual performance. So this is from 1965, Aspects of the Theory of Syntax. Okay, so this, and he later on went on to say that, language, what we study as language is the faculty of language of an individual human organism, which is I, right? It's called the I language, which is internal or idiolect. That word idiolect, I thought was pretty instructive. Okay, if you look up the meaning of that word, you would see that it's related to the word idiot, which comes from the Greek word idiotis, a term used to describe someone who lived an entirely private existence and took no part in the public life of the city. Okay, so what this says is, so should we now wonder if that is what the objective inquiry is? Should we now wonder why that kind of linguistics, which calls itself biolinguistics? I mean, no negative connotation intended, right? I mean, I just saying what it is, right? Biolinguistics has should we wonder now why biolinguistics has nothing to do with social or political questions? Of course, there's nothing wrong with the framework. The philosophical base is reasonably strong, right? He argues for that in an article, a 1995 article, Language and Nature, which appeared in the journal Mind. I still have some questions. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. So this is an attempt to critically examine the definition and the worldview that led to this. For full disclosure, I must also say that I don't have any loyalty for him, and I don't need to have any loyalty to him. What underlies the Chomskyan view? A strong belief in the idealization made in science. The principles and laws arrived at by science apply to certain idealized models of phenomena, not to the phenomena themselves, right? So we're talking about laws of motion or gas laws, like pressure is directly proportional to temperature, or pressure is inversely proportional to volume, or so on and so on. These things apply to certain idealized models, okay, not to the phenomena themselves. So now I just want to move on because we have to ultimately make the connection to justice and freedom, right? So Chomsky, interestingly, has an article. He has written an article called Language and Freedom. This was something that he wrote in 1973. Okay, in that, what he does is trace the history of discussions of freedom and language from European thinkers like Rousseau, Kant, and Descartes. There are some very powerful expressions of freedom that are absolutely relevant for our times. I strongly recommend that. However, the main idea that Chomsky makes in that article was that the study of language offers a rigorous way of making inquiries in social sciences. For example, see this. I think that the study of language can provide some glimmerings of understanding of rule-governed behavior and the possibilities for free and creative action within the framework of a system of rules that in part at least reflect intrinsic properties of human mental organization. He goes on further, suggesting that this approach can be used to study other aspects of human psychology and culture. Conceivably, we might in this way develop a social science based on empirically well-founded propositions concerning human nature. Just as we study the range of humanly attainable languages with some success, we might also try to study the forms of artistic expressions, or for that matter, scientific knowledge that humans can conceive, and perhaps even the range of ethical systems and social structures in which humans can live and function, given their intrinsic capacities and needs. Perhaps one might go on to project a concept of social organization that would, under given conditions of material and spiritual culture, best encourage and accommodate the fundamental human need, if such it is, for spontaneous initiative, creative work, solidarity, pursuit of social justice. This is interesting, isn't it? He's going beyond the combinatorial rules of language, but I see a problem here, a distrust for inquiries that involve descriptive and reflexive accounts of experiences. What Chomsky is trying to bring in is a very rational and scientific approach to the study of language. Okay, let me speak briefly about a problem with the method adopted in biolinguistics. You have caged or decontextualized sentences. So what I mean is words combined to form phrases and phrases combined to form sentences, and all these are marked by boundaries, right? Labeled, bracketing, and so on. So these are, you have units which are in cages in a sense. So they're decontextualized and unconnected trees. That's not how you see trees in forests, right? So the idea is that if you have cages, your analysis would be easier. You focus on one cage and you study that, and that would give you a good picture, and you study another cage, and then you get a good idea, and you put all these ideas together, and you get a very good understanding of that. Okay, but this is a problem, right? So can you think of other ways of studying linguistics? Like I said, you can think of ways in which you bring in descriptive accounts or reflexive issues into this inquiry, right? So, but then there's a very specific sense in which this object is described in articles like Language and Nature. Now, I suggest that linguistics include ethical questions like matters of exclusion, underrepresentation, or fears of being swept away by stronger currents. Part of the change lies in including everyone in your scientific inquiry. Now, I just moved to the central inquiry. Since this is very short, I have to come to the point. The view that language is a means of understanding the mind, a key to understanding society, and an example for carrying out social science inquiries in a systematic manner show that thinkers like Chomsky find it hard to imagine other ways of studying disciplines which are of a different kind of animal. Let me give you an example from my own life, my day job as a language teacher. The measurement of learning outcomes for a course on communication skills for engineering students. We have to list the students' marks for the different assessments and run a program on MS Excel. And you get a set of numbers and graphs, and that is supposed to tell you something about the student's language skills. Does it really give you the information that you need? I leave you to answer that question. If you need a realistic picture of that, you would ask questions like, does the student read a lot in English? Does the student have friends with whom they speak English? What is their socioeconomic background? What kind of web series does the student watch? Kind of contemporary interest, and so on. Maybe this is a good time to bring in my anecdote, right? I mean, I once wrote a short blog piece about the problem of education in India, in which I identified the lack of rationality as a reason for all ills in Indian education. Hani said that it was a wrong analysis. Although I don't recall his exact words, his idea was that I was trying to force fit a very complex problem into my narrow understanding of rationality. HB's opinion, Hani Babu's opinion, was that social class should not be a deciding factor for who could do linguistics in an academic sense. The question of who can do academic research, especially in natural sciences, and linguistics aspires to be a natural science, this question is a social and political one. The fact is well known and acknowledged. For example, see the 2016 piece in the journal Nature, Is Science Only for the Rich? In the section on India, TV Padma writes that students from rural and oppressed caste backgrounds have relatively less chances of succeeding in science. You can think of many examples from the IITs, central universities in 2016 itself. Right? A prominent Indian chemist referred to in the Nature article, Gautam Deshiraju, points out that rural students are hampered by a lack of good science teachers and lab facilities and opportunities to enter mainstream science. From my experience as an observer of EFLU, I would say that linguistics has done pretty little to offer opportunities to such students. Hani Babu believed that linguistics research should not be dependent on English. If you know one language and if you have some analytical ability which can be imparted and cultivated, it's necessary to impart and cultivate. It takes some effort. You can be a good linguist. There were a few people who would not agree with him on this, as we can imagine. And obviously, I know that Chaturvarna, breaking the Chaturvarna of languages is a very important paper, but I don't have really time to get into that. So I'll come to the next important section point, which is about Feyerabend, Paul Feyerabend, his essay, How to Defend Society Against Science. His basic point is that overarching ideologies must be questioned. In the European context, science and rationality questioned religious orthodoxy and its overarching impact on people's lives. In that sense, it had a liberating influence. But now, Feyerabend claims science has become almost an overarching ideology. So it is time to question that. Feyerabend writes, to defend society against science, we should place science under democratic control and be intensely skeptical about scientific experts, consulting them only if they are controlled by juries of lay people. The point is that non-experts can also have a view on how science is done, be it the installation of an environmentally damaging power plant, or the amount spent for developing weapons of mass destruction or surveillance. Now that we are talking about ordinary people, it might be good to think of how the experts view the subjects. In the biolinguistics enterprise, subjects are mostly informants who give grammaticality judgments. If we take a lesson from the life sciences, we observe that there are scientists who are deeply concerned about the ethical treatment of their subjects. They're involved in activism, such as the one for treating animals as legal persons, animals as legal persons. The attempt is to start with obviously intelligent mammals like chimpanzees, gorillas, and orcas, as a species of tremendous interest for me, killer whales and dolphins, and slowly move the freedom project to other species. I refer to the work of the whale biologist and neuroscientist Lori Marino in this regard. So for them, the subject is not just an instrument for furthering our knowledge of nature and thus controlling it. Instead, they extend their concerns of freedom, family bonds, and cultures to understand how animals should be treated. It can be extended to trees and entities like rivers and mountain ranges, without which life would be impossible. The reason for this subdue and control approach would probably be traced to the Judeo-Christian worldview, rule over everything, as the book of Genesis said, and a related patriarchal control of women and nature. A reworked view of the subject in an academic sense should also make us rethink the political subject. Human organisms existing within boundaries of a political unit whose minds and bodies are completely observed and controlled by the state. A flourishing of the inner life of humans should be made possible. Now, I already made a plea for infusing ethics into linguistic research. Many of you are probably already practicing it, so I don't get to that. It's my concluding sentence. As we speak in a format where we just have windows, Zoom windows, but no doors, our sentences are caged, our trees are isolated, people are in prisons, chimpanzees are in cages, and orcas are in concrete tanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Jobin. Thelma, could we have your talk now? Then we'll have a composite discussion period. If you would turn your video set on.
Hi, everyone. Today, in honor of Hani sir, I would be community. Hani sir and me, we have been working together since my master's. I've written a term paper under his guidance, one of my term papers under his guidance, and I had also completed my MPhil under him. And Actually, I'm currently pursuing PhD under him. So today, in honor of Henny sir, I will be talking about the Hmar community. First of all, who are the Hmar community? The Hmar community constitute one of the biggest ethnic group within the Chin Kuki Mizo nomenclature. G.A. Gearson included Hmar language as part of Tibeto-Burman linguistic family. The Hmar ethnic group have measured concentrations in Mizoram, Manipur, and Assam. So in this paper, this paper shall trace the different forms of linguistic injustice through Hmar autobiographical memory. And it will also try to understand the role of historical memory, existing oral narrative, and remembrance in shaping the idea of the self and the notion of one's group or ethnic identity. Many forms of linguistic injustice had been witnessed by individuals and targeted groups when I had interviewed during my field research. And even masses have also witnessed different forms of linguistic injustice. I wouldn't be able to put each and everything, and I wouldn't be able to demonstrate in my paper, but I have selected some few incidents so that we will be able to understand how the role of historical memory and all this existing oral narrative and remembrance shape the idea of the self and the notion of one's ethnic group or identity. The Hmar community had started experiencing linguistic injustice since 1910. 1910, this is also the year where when they embraced Christianity, the white missionaries and volunteers from the Lusai Hill, now known as Mizoram, they came to